or give me death.
To come to the District of Columbia to participate with you all in an effort to try to bring some rationality to this very important mission of ICE. That is the only reason I'm here. It's not for the glory, and it's not for the big bucks. I will tell you that I need your help to accomplish that goal and to move the agency forward in that regard. So I ask for your help in doing so. I welcome your questions.
Well, thank you, Director Saldana. I'll start with some recent quotes, one by the President and one by you, that I find disturbing. You just alluded to one a moment ago. But first, the President recently at a town hall stated regarding the new DHS enforcement priorities that the bottom line is that if somebody is working for ICE and there is a policy and they don't follow the policy, there are going to be consequences to it. And he analogized it to the U.S. military and the requirement that you follow orders. ICE officers are required to enforce the laws that Congress enacts. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Please explain to the committee the type of consequences that ICE officers may face if they do not execute the new policies, which in instances contradict those laws. Don't you think an ICE officer hearing threats from the President would be scared to enforce the law?
I give them more credit than that, Mr. Chairman. I will tell you that with respect to enforcement of any policy of the Department or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, new or old, certainly, just as you do with your staff, we expect compliance with that policy.
If they detain somebody who doesn't meet those priorities but is in violation of a law enacted by the Congress, are they going to be punished for doing that?
The word is not punish, sir. It's enforcing the law as
What's going to happen to an ICE agent who enforces the law that's contradictory to the President's policies, which says don't enforce the law with regard to certain people?
That's not my view of the President's policy, sir. The executive action actually...
He said it, not me.
That is not my view of the President's policies. I believe they're actually directed in a very rational way. I mentioned earlier that...
Right. The point is, though, that the law encompasses far more illegal activity than simply those that are set forth in the President's policies. And I want to know what happens to an ICE agent, may have been working for the agency for years, following the law, upholding the law, who detains somebody who is not covered under that policy. What's going to happen to that ICE agent under those circumstances?
Let me tell you, sir, you mentioned something about the full extent of the law, and the Constitution does require us to faithfully execute it. Part of that, in my view, and in my experience as a United States Attorney, I mentioned 3,000 laws when we stopped counting. I could not enforce every one of those laws as the main prosecutor for the United States, but I could actually make priorities within my office and did.
Well, you're not answering my question, so let me go on to one that involves a statement made by you. You testified before the Oversight and Government Reform Committee on March 19th expressing your support for mandatory detainers. The very next day, you retracted that statement, made under oath, and called mandatory detainers highly counterproductive. In 2014, local jurisdictions declined to honor approximately 12,000 detainers. So far in 2015, there have been approximately 3,000 detainer denials. There are now more than 200 jurisdictions that refuse to honor ICE detainers, effectively releasing criminal aliens out onto our streets. While you flip-flop before Congress and the American people, ICE officers go out into the community and conduct at-large operations in order to apprehend released criminal aliens. It makes their job much, much harder, right? Instead of just going to the jail and getting the detained alien to put them through the deportation process, they had to go out, find them, apprehend them, sometimes under very dangerous circumstances. This puts their lives at risk, threatens public safety, and expends limited federal resources. If a detainer was issued, a simple and cost-effective custodial transfer would have occurred. This is a problem. And your solution, the administration's solution, is a failure. Politely asking for cooperation from recalcitrant jurisdictions, so-called sanctuary cities, is a fool's errand. Isn't the clear answer to this problem a requirement for everyone to honor ICE's detainer authority, an authority that keeps our communities and our law enforcement officers safe?
That authority is being challenged in court, sir. There's a morass of lawsuits across the country on that very issue.
Why hasn't your agency and the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security defended those lawsuits against these detainers? Why haven't you taken an affirmative, aggressive position to say, yes, the detainers need to be honored?
I will tell you that I have the same concern you do, sir. Public safety of our officers is paramount in my estimate. I went on Operation Crosscheck back in February wearing a bulletproof vest, there to watch the operation in practice where we're actually trying to reach out and find criminal undocumented immigrants. I am very concerned about the risks they face. But I will tell you that I believe that the PEP program, if we give it a chance, and again, I do regret that confusion I caused with respect to my statement. And the only reason for the statement the following day was because I had been asked whether it would help law enforcement. And let me tell you, sir, my reaction was focused on that. What helps law enforcement?
Right.
But I am committed to PEP. I am committed to asking communities to assist us. I am committed to persuade them that the best thing for the safety of their own communities is to cooperate with the United States in its effort to enforce the immigration laws in accordance with the President's priorities.
Director, my time has expired. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Conyers, for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman Goodlatte. Director Saldana, you make me feel more comfortable now that we've read and listened to your performance here before the House Judiciary Committee. There are three things I wanted to bring to your attention and get your comments on. One is the idea that the memorandum was not affected by the court's ruling and that ICE intends to fully implement the Secretary's memorandum. Could you comment on that?
I believe what you're referring to, Congressman, is the fact that there is a ruling that stops, calls to a halt, expanded DACA and the new DAPA program. And we are obviously, all the agencies, to my knowledge, CIS, CBP, and ICE, are complying with that ruling. And it'll make its way through the appellate courts. But it did not affect the November 20th enunciation of our priorities by the Secretary, and which we've clearly implemented to our people. We have actually put out in the field substantial training on this, sir. And every officer uses one of these cards, which clearly outlines those priorities. They carry it with them. Quite frankly, I carry it myself, and try to make sure that each of these priorities, both with respect to the first one is outlined in the front, the second and third priorities on the back. Again, trying to make an effort to clarify for law enforcement where our priorities should be. So that is what is meant by that, is that we're not, the only thing that was affected by the injunction was the expansion of DACA and the new initiation of the DAPA program.
Very good. Now, what steps is ICE taking to ensure that persons who are not a priority for removal are not targeted for enforcement actions or are not inadvertently swept up in enforcement actions?
Well, one of the steps, sir, is the training, and it was substantial, and we just completed it in January, which was the initiation kickoff of the executive actions, and that includes those priorities. I have met with every one of the field office directors in the entire country by video. I have directed them that if they have any questions, they are to raise it up their chain and ultimately to me, who bears the ultimate responsibility with respect to the appropriate enforcement of those priorities. Our training doesn't stop just with that was completed initially. It is a continuing kind of spectrum. And I have also met with our lawyers. There are about 900 of them across the country which work with the immigration courts in order to ensure in their review of the priorities and the people who have been targeted for enforcement that we're complying with those priorities.
Very good. Let me ask this question about some reports that have come to our attention about mothers and children in family detention. There was a memo drafted by the Secretary explaining field officers and directors should not expend detention resources on aliens who are known to be suffering from serious physical or mental illness. In light of this memo, how, if you know, does ICE justify detaining mothers and children with such serious physical or mental illnesses?
I think you're also aware, Representative, of the injunction that was imposed by the Washington, D.C. court with respect to the detention of families and not to use deterrence as a factor. Every one of those families, just like others, is afforded the opportunities provided by law with respect to seeking asylum, seeking some relief from the United States with respect to their presence here. I will say I've met with the Secretary many times discussing this very same subject. I just met on Thursday of last week with religious leaders from all sectors of the religious community who have expressed very serious concerns about the detention of families and children, and we are doing our best right now. I know that the Secretary has considered it. I know that we have released with respect to that injunction quite a few of these families. Some of them continue because they cannot meet a detention bond, but it's something that has been well considered by the Secretary, and for now we're going to hold with respect to particularly new entrants, sir, which is part of our priorities, that line.
Madam Director, I thank you for your candid responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, a recent public opinion poll apparently shows that the American people repudiate President Obama's immigration policies. This was a Rasmussen Reports national survey just a few days ago that found that 62% of the American people believe the administration is not doing enough to deport illegal immigrants. This is up 10 points from just a year ago. I think this is the American people's response to the President's executive amnesty orders. Contrary to what the American people want, it appears that deportations are down again this year. I think there were only about 100,000 from the interior. You said a while ago that about 85% are those who have been convicted of crimes. But that means that only about 1 out of 300 other illegal immigrants are going to be removed from our country. In my opinion, that is not enforcing immigration laws. In fact, it's ignoring immigration laws. Furthermore, the administration, as you also mentioned, released about 30,000 convicted illegal immigrants and allowed them to be returned to our communities. 1/4 of these 30,000 criminal aliens had been convicted of level 1 crimes such as murder, rape, and sexual abuse of a minor. Of those 30,000, only 8% were Zaveda's cases. Thousands could have been deported. Why did the administration intentionally endanger the lives of innocent Americans by releasing thousands of criminal aliens into our neighborhoods?
Representative, this is an area of great concern for me when I first started in January.
If it's of great concern, why did you do it?
I would like to explain why we are moving forward as we are. We do not have a policy. our decisions, whether they're detention decisions, bond decisions, release decisions, are governed by several things and often involve the courts. As you know, and I think that the chairman noted, about half in 2014 of the releases were as a result of Zabidas, and which requires us to release people after a certain
My
time.
statement was, and you haven't contradicted it, that the administration is intentionally releasing thousands of individuals. These are convicted individuals of serious crimes back into our neighborhoods and communities. It actually increased over the last year from the year before. Why are you doing this to the American people? You know their recidivism rate is high. You know these individuals are going to be convicted of other crimes. Why are you doing this to the American people?
If I may answer, sir, if I may complete my answer, what I am saying is, again, let's make sure we're comparing apples to apples. We're talking about 55% of those having been ICE discretionary decisions, which I think is the heart of your concern.
I'm willing to concede several thousand are in that category. I'm also willing to concede that 8% is of ICE. That still leaves thousands of people that should be deported, in my opinion, that are not being deported, that are endangering innocent Americans. Again, why are you doing this? Why aren't you stopping?
Because the Congress lays out due process, sir, for every person that is detained.
Are you disagreeing? Are you saying you could not deport these individuals? Thousands of these individuals?
I cannot deport any individual without an order from the court, either an immigration court or a federal court.
Right. And if you sought that order, you could deport thousands of these individuals, and you're not trying to do it. Again, why not?
We only make decisions with respect to, you know, the criminal justice system releases murderers, rapists, sexual assaulters every day when a federal judge decides, you know, this person does not present a flight risk or a safe danger to the community. That's the same considerations the law and the regulations.
The law allows you to deport these individuals if you want to. Director, you are not giving the American people a good answer. I hope you will come back with a better answer in the future. And let me go to the next subject, which is secure communities. You said in your testimony that one of the reasons that the administration terminated secure communities is because local jurisdictions refused to comply with it. Well, this is interesting that you don't feel that if local jurisdictions want to comply with federal laws, they don't need to, or you're going to not force them to do so. But have you ever challenged any of these local jurisdictions to comply with the current federal law? And let me read you that federal law real quickly. It says, a federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from
Sir, I'm sorry,
the Immigration Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship of immigration status.
Representative Smith, I'm having difference hearing you.
Just take my word. Current law says that local communities should be able to work together with from local and federal officials to remove individuals. And you yourself had said one reason you're not enforcing the law is because local communities fail to comply with it. Why aren't you trying to enforce it? In what ways have you tried to force local communities to follow federal law?
Again, that is a subject of litigation. You yourself just said should cooperate.
What has the administration done to try to enforce current law in regard to security?
We have met. The Secretary...
You haven't filed any lawsuit against any entity.
I have not filed any lawsuit.
And that's my point. Why didn't you try to force
there are
them to
plenty of
comply
lawsuits
with
out
federal
there.
law?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Representative. There are plenty of lawsuits out there that are still in the middle of litigation. I'm not going to opine or get in the middle of those.
No.
What I'm trying to tell you is...
I'm not asking you to. The administration has not done anything to try to enforce the current secure communities law. Do you have any evidence?
That comes as a surprise to me because I personally have been engaged in meeting with representatives...
The administration has done the opposite. They've said you don't need to comply with it.
May I answer the question, please? I really do want the American public to understand that I'm not sitting on my hands. I actually have gotten out to meet with the major city police chiefs, the major county sheriffs, the California Corps of Sheriffs when they were in town a couple of months ago, and other jurisdictions to personally advise them of what the parameters of the law are, what we're trying to do to work with them.
But you said in your own testimony...
Time of the gentleman has expired.
You weren't going to enforce the law because they... I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman, but I'm so sorry that the American people aren't getting good answers today.